very interested in this idea of rethinking building cities from the notion of what can be done without tearing them down and building very top-down infrastructure. I like the idea of emergent infrastructure, but I could easily imagine cities of the future have little launch things that you throw materials or people through the air. And that would be a very different kind of thing because it could be built up incrementally. Or I could imagine, for instance, sewage and water systems being like root systems that grew under the city and up through the city. I think there's some ways of rethinking things that may actually be necessary if we think of building from sort of spontaneously emerged cities. One of the nice things about emergent infrastructure is it can be built up in pieces and incrementally, and it can evolve, be different in different parts, and be very heterogeneous. And so I think we'll see that kind of infrastructure evolving. One of the big distinctions of life in the future from life in the past is that life in the past was much more bound to a single place. So it used to be that where you were born determined what your religion was, what kind of food you ate, what your politics was, what language you spoke. Almost everything about you was determined by where you were. And so now that's not so much true anymore. It's partly because transportation has become much better for people, for goods, but also for information in particular. I think one of the great things about technology is going to be that it's going to make knowledge and education much more widespread. It makes information accessible to many more people. So I think that the distinction between the experts and the amateurs will become less because of technology. And that opens up many more people to be, enables many more people to be creative constructively. So I think we're at a very interesting moment in time right now, where the idea of even distinguishing between nature and technology is almost an old-fashioned, it's becoming an old-fashioned idea. It can evolve technological objects, the technological objects can have intelligence and growth built into them. And so I would say that those distinctions are becoming less and less clear. And so I think more and more there will be things that is very hard to say, is this technology, is this nature? And in some sense our relationship to technology is becoming more like our relationship with nature, because it used to be the technology was understandable. That, by the way, that's what I call the entanglement, because we entangle our technology with nature and it becomes much more complicated. And we'll start to entangle ourselves with our technology, even the distinction between where do humans stop and where does technology start. So I think manufacturing is becoming very different. We'll set up a situation in which the things that we want will create themselves or become formed and created. But they won't necessarily be assembled out of parts as we do today. I think they'll be more grown and formed. Bucky Fuller was certainly a pioneer in kind of thinking about the philosophy of how things are made, how we use materials, and sort of looking at the fundamentals of that. It's very interesting that some of the shapes that he envisioned, like geodesic domes, we've found actually nature knew about all along. It was a fantastic way of thinking about the world and starting to think about the use of materials in architecture and things like that. So I think that we need both a kind of philosophical long-term framework, and then we need practical engineering. I am an optimist, but I'm not an optimist because I think we have small problems. Certainly things like global warming, for example, is a huge problem. So I don't minimize things like that. But I think we underestimate our ability to face problems. We underestimate the power of creativity. But we underestimated the creativity of people to come up with solutions. And so I think I'm an optimist because I'm a believer in creativity and the human capacity to solve problems and face challenges.